Next on the news. Strengthening faith with war nearby. Pope Francis is in Hungary to talk Christian values and the need to help Ukrainian refugees. And they're not just there. Ukrainian refugees are struggling here in the United States.
He fled his war-torn country, only to fight to survive in New York City. I'm Jessica Easthope with the Ukrainian refugee who says he's not giving up on the American dream.
A major change after 200+ years. The Sisters of Charity of New York are closing their doors to newcomers. Plus this.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Helping those who need it most. The parishioner who's making sure the homeless have a warm meal in tonight's Pulse of the Parish. I'm Christine Persichetti. This special edition of Currents News starts right now. Pope Francis has begun his apostolic journey to Hungary. It's his first trip since being admitted to the hospital for bronchitis last month. The Holy Father keeping his promise to return to the people of this Eastern European country after a quick stop there in 2021. But this visit comes at a time of war in neighboring Ukraine. Pope Francis landed in Hungary Friday morning for a trip the Vatican says is focused on strengthening the faith of the local church. But as war rages on in neighboring Ukraine, the Holy Father is also addressing the violence and the plight of the refugees. At his first official meeting in Budapest, Francis met with President Katalin Novak at the Sandor Palace. And he met Prime Minister Viktor Orban. They then traveled to the seat of the Hungarian government, where the Holy Father addressed the two leaders and others. Pope Francis didn't mince words as he spoke about Europe's Christian values and migration. In his speech, Francis talked about the effects of World War II in Europe and warned against having a short memory and allowing the same horrors to occur with the victims of the war in Ukraine.
A livello internazionale pare persino che la politica abbia come effetto quello di infiammare le anime affinché di risolvere i problemi. Dimentica della naturalità raggiunta dopo gli orrori della guerra, regredita a una sorta di infantilismo bellico.
Hungary's relations with Western leaders have deteriorated considerably since the war in Ukraine began. While it shares a border with Ukraine, it has maintained relations with Russia and refused to back military aid for Kyiv. Pope Francis ended his first day in Hungary at the Co-Cathedral of St. Stephen's, which was packed with Hungarian clergy and lay people. Much of the rest of the Pope's trip will be spent with the lay people of Hungary. On Saturday, he'll visit visually impaired children. Then he'll meet with refugees at the Church of St. Elizabeth of Hungary. Finally, the Pope will meet with young people at a sports arena where he will deliver a speech. On Sunday, the Holy Father will celebrate Mass at what is commonly known as Nation Square in the center of Budapest. He will then deliver his final speech of the trip to members of the cultural and academic world at the Faculty of Information Technology and Bionics at a Catholic university before heading back to Rome. Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux, is traveling with the Pope. She joins us now. Hi, Elise.
Hello, Christine.
So, Elise, we mentioned earlier that this is Pope Francis's first trip since his hospitalization. I know he joked on the plane when he was asked about his health. What did he say, and how is he holding up?
You know, that's a good question. I think that's something all of us were very anxious to see, was how he would handle this trip after his hospital stay at the end of last month. He looked energetic and enthusiastic this morning on the plane. In the past, for the past few flights, we've had to go up to greet him because he's been unable to walk back to greet us and to stand for that long. But this morning he was able to come back and spend about half an hour with us in the back of the plane, which was good for him. And he walked up to meet, the Hungarian President Katalin Novak and the Prime Minister Viktor Orban. He stood throughout much of that opening ceremony and through his entire speech to authorities in the diplomatic corps. He did use a wheelchair later on in the day, but he seemed in very good form today, in very good spirits, and I have to say he looked good.
That's great to hear. And he did bring a pretty strong message on migration to the government leaders that he met, including Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has called himself an anti-immigration politician. What struck you the most about the Pope's speech?
You know, well, the Pope had a lot of different messages that he was trying to send today in his opening speech. And certainly the point of migration was one of them. He was very insistent on the need to be welcoming. And he said it's really the Christian attitude. And he sort of drove that point home in a very Hungarian way, right? Because he invoked one of their most famous saints, the first Hungarian king, Saint Stephen. So he's the first Hungarian king, but he's also a saint of the Catholic Church. And he cited several passages of St. Stephen's writings when he talked about the need to be welcoming and accepting of the stranger. You know, we don't turn away people in need. We welcome them and we embrace them. And he said that's really not only part of Hungary's history, and it's not only part of Hungarian society, you know, and their hospitality. He said it's really, it goes back to the roots of Europe. Europe is a place of welcome, and he really stressed the need to continue to be welcoming. He said this is really the gospel attitude. He said if you are Christian, you will welcome the stranger and those in need, and if you don't, you're not really a Christian. So it was a very strong message with Viktor Orban standing right there. You know, he talked also about the need to, you know, not be discouraged, you know, in the face of sort of the waning of some traditional values. You know, there's a growth of secularism in Europe, and he said don't be discouraged by that. And he praised Hungary for its embrace of traditional Christian values, and you know, in its defense of traditional marriage, for example, and its stance on abortion. They have very strict laws in terms of when you can access abortion. So he was very, he praised Hungary and their society, but he also drove the point home when he needed to.
Hitting all the themes of his trip in one day. Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux. Thanks for keeping us informed, and we'll check back in with you on Monday.
Thanks, Christine.
Be sure to follow Currents News and the tablet all through this weekend. And on Monday, we'll give you all the information you need to know about the Pope's trip. Before the pontiff left for his trip, he had a conversation of peace with the Prime Minister of Ukraine. The Holy Father received Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. Both sides talked about the ongoing confrontation with Russia and what's being done to try to stop it. During the meeting, the Prime Minister invited the Holy Father to visit Ukraine, but he said he would only do so if he could also go to Russia, which he has stated before. Meanwhile, some of those fleeing the violence in Ukraine are coming here to the U.S. under a Biden administration program. But one refugee tells us he's struggling to survive in New York City. As Jessica Easthope reports, he went from war in Ukraine to homelessness in Coney Island.
We just moved so that waves won't come to our tent.
Coming from a country taken over by violence and destruction, Stanislav Holityuk says anything is an upgrade.
It wasn't the worst part.
Even living in a tent under the boardwalk in Coney Island. That's where he spent his first 2 weeks in the United States. He's no longer living here, but he's still wondering if the dream he was sold about a full life in America will ever come true.
After war in Ukraine, actually, everything will be better. But I thought that America could help really more.
Stanislav and more than 117,000 other Ukrainians came under the Biden administration program Uniting for Ukraine. It allows Ukrainians to apply for temporary protected status as long as they have a sponsor giving them financial support. But Stanislav doesn't know his sponsor. He's a person he found on Facebook, a name used to get a ticket into America.
We understood that we will have maybe problems, so it was like adventure for us.
But Stanislav says this new adventure quickly turned into a wild ride. And he's not on it alone.
They don't know anyone. They try to find out where to find the place and to live and to help to have some like financial support. And we will try to help all of them like this.
Irina Dobnia is the director of Catholic Charities of New York's Ukrainian Response Program. She said most of the Ukrainians her office helps have either never met their sponsor or were left stranded when the financial burden became too much.
The doors of our office are always open for them, but still we need a lot of help to help the people, because we are expecting this year, 2023, still like 15,000 newcomers from Ukraine.
As of this month, 300,000 Ukrainians have arrived in the United States under various programs. That number is higher than all other people from around the world combined admitted into the country's refugee program in the last 5 years. Stanislav said he couldn't stay to see the war play out, or worse, join the fight.
A lot of people think you man, you must be at war. I don't know. I'm not a hero. I'm not a soldier. Heroes, Ukrainian soldiers, they're heroes. I'm not a hero.
Stanislav is a computer programmer by trade. Here, he can't find legal work and has no steady income. And without a credit score, he can't even rent an apartment. But he's not ready to give up.
It would be really cool if I could stay here, but for now, I don't believe that Ukrainians will allowed to stay here, but it's sad.
Irina is waiting for the state-funded USARA program, Ukraine's supplemental appropriation to resettlement agencies, to take off. She says it's a comprehensive and viable path for refugees.
Living in his own rented house and to have a job and to be self-sustained. This is the main aim of USARA.
Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
To give you the scope of how much this program has expanded, here's how temporary protected status has grown under the Biden administration. According to Pew Research, an estimated 670,000 people from 16 countries are either registered for TPS or newly eligible for it. In the last 2 years, the Department of Homeland Security added 5 countries to the list of those that qualify for extended temporary protected status. Immigrants with TPS currently live in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and all U.S. territories. And New York has one of the largest populations of immigrants with temporary protected status. Any Ukrainian refugees looking for support can contact Catholic Charities of New York. Just go to ccccsny.org and search for refugee resettlement. A major change for the Sisters of Charity of New York, who will no longer accept new members of their congregation. And after a painful vote, which was unanimous, the sisters joined each other in prayer and song. No word on exactly why they made this move. In addition, they emphasize that they will continue to promote vocations and will redirect any inquiries to the Religious Formation Conference. There are currently 154 Sisters of Charity of New York. For more than 200 years, the congregation has been serving the people of New York, helping orphans, families, the homeless, immigrants, and so much more. There's a lot more news headed your way. Self-defense from a deacon. This church leader is helping his flock navigate the mean streets of New York City safely. Out of Brooklyn Parish, this chef is leading the call to help the homeless. Plus, we take one more look at the Pope's first full day in Hungary.
Holy Week in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Currents News was there to cover it all. From the Palm Sunday procession.
About 100 Catholics took to the streets of Brooklyn.
To the Chrism Mass.
Currents News' Jessica Easthope is in the thick of it all.
There are some priests here celebrating their 65th anniversary of ordination.
The conclusion of the first Lenten pilgrimage.
Bishop Brennan joined pilgrims for a majority of the journey.
Holy Thursday and the Way of the Cross on Good Friday.
The Way of the Cross is making its way over the Brooklyn Bridge.
Plus, powerful testimonies from new Catholics.
I'm blessed to be able to wake up every morning.
And a message of hope from Bishop Brennan.
Christ is alive.
Currents News is there. Happy Easter.
Moves like these aren't just for karate class. These defense tactics may come in handy while walking the streets. Church leaders are known to help us grow spiritually, but because of an uptick in serious crimes in New York City, Deacon Dean Dobbins wants to make sure we know how to protect ourselves too. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has his story from Fresh Meadows.
The Holy Spirit powers these kicks, and faith fuels the force of these strikes. Deacon Dean Dobbins says when it comes to self-defense, you can never be too prepared.
Don't touch me. You never know what perpetrator might be coming at you. You never know.
especially in times like this.
The permanent deacon at Our Lady of Mercy Church in Forest Hills is also a former NYPD detective and 8th degree black belt who knows just how dangerous the streets of New York City have become.
People are getting pushed into subways, people are getting mugged, people are getting punched in the face, and people that would take the martial arts, maybe they would be able to defend themselves, walk away from it, but be more secure of the surroundings.
While the NYPD doesn't keep statistics on random and unprovoked attacks, so far in the first 4 months of 2023, there have been nearly 8,000 felony assaults and more than 12,600 misdemeanor assaults. That's more than the number of assaults in the entirety of 2022. At Deacon Dean's dojo, the Okinawan karate-do of New York, he welcomes people from all walks of life to come in and learn the discipline and inner strength it takes to stay safe on the streets. Destin Kava is a 7th grader at Our Lady of Mercy Catholic Academy. Since he and his cousin Solmarie Navas started taking karate lessons here last year, they're more self-aware and much more confident.
I don't have both of my headphones in or anything like that. I make sure that I'm careful. Now, since I'm in martial arts, I'm starting to communicate, socialize even more.
Thumb strike, this is great for women.
Deacon Dean says his classes are not about fighting, but thriving.
It helps them in school, helps them in their faith, and it helps them to be aware what's out there.
And what's out there? Better think twice. In Fresh Meadows, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Young or old, Deacon Dean says these moves can be accomplished by anyone. He showed us one move we can all master. Check it out.
Let's say the person is older, right? Like me, right? Person grabs you, hey, you're in a situation, you're a martial artist, boom, strike, grab, and sweep them down. Right? So you could be from 50 to 100 and do that if done correctly. All right?
Regardless of your opponent, Deacon Dean emphasizes that children, teens, and adults are capable of these moves. Interested in some lessons? If so, signing up is easy for classes at Deacon Dean's Okinawan Karate-Do of New York. Just visit facebook.com/karate-ny. Serving the Maspeth community for a combined 265 years, Transfiguration and St. Stanislaus Kostka churches reflected on their faith and history last weekend during Mass. The combined anniversary Mass was celebrated by Bishop Robert Brennan at Transfiguration Church, which, according to the parish, opened 115 years ago as the first Lithuanian national church in Maspeth. Decades before that, in 1872, St. Stanislaus Church was built to help a growing Catholic community. The two parishes merged in 2019. Following the festive Mass at Transfiguration, there was exposition of the Blessed Sacrament and a procession to St. Stanislaus Church for benediction. Over in Brooklyn, St. Mark Catholic Academy also celebrated a centennial anniversary. The special ceremony marking when the school's 1923 cornerstone was laid and building began. The Sheepshead Bay School started under the leadership of the Sisters of St. Dominic of Columbus, Ohio, and their mission was simple: teach the primarily Irish and Italian children through faith. Now, a century later, on the feast of their patron St. Mark, they recognize this moment in history with a Mass, a blessing, and the rededication of their school building. How fun. Still to come on Currents News, he's combining his cooking skills with his Catholic faith.
It makes me feel good when I come down and I can do something to help out other people, which is what Jesus really wants us to do.
How this parishioner is using his rectory kitchen to help others. From meeting government leaders to church leaders, we take a look again at the Pope's first day in Hungary. You know that saying, what would Jesus do? Well, a group of parishioners at Our Lady of Grace in Brooklyn is taking that to heart by serving hot meals to the homeless. And the one manning the kitchen, Pat Fleming, is tonight's Pulse of the Parish. The beauty of Our Lady of Grace in Gravesend is what stood out to its pastor when he was assigned here in 2021.
It reminds me of a Spanish mission church. So that impressed me right away because I always liked that architecture. And then the beauty of the church as you come in and the sanctuary, very quaint, very cozy, and people call it their home.
In fact, Father Guy Spordoni says some of the very first parishioners still call it their home, ever since they started digging the foundation in 1936.
The homeless ministry, the pastoral ministry, all are the same people who've been here for years doing it.
It's an older congregation made up of the Italians who were here from the beginning. Father Guy says while their kids have moved away, the so-called old-timers have stuck around, and they're an active bunch.
Lectors, ministers, people, you want to call them old-timers, whatever phrase gives them an identity. But no, they still have a love for their parish, which is very evident in all that they do.
Pat Fleming is one of them, and he feels right at home in the rectory's downstairs kitchen. For the past 15 years, Pat's been the cook for the Feed the Homeless ministry.
Makes me feel good when I come down and I can do something to help out other people, which is what Jesus really wants us to do. He wants us to help out other people.
The Brooklynite says he started cooking as a kid out of necessity.
When I was young, like in grammar school, if I wanted to eat breakfast, because I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and my mother ain't getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to cook, I had to cook my own breakfast.
Now he does it out of love and for the camaraderie.
Me and my wife, we argue over who's going to cook. She's a good cook. I'm a better cook. Hey, don't tell her that I said that.
This ministry of friends meets every Wednesday morning. First, breaking bread together, then preparing and packing up meals for those less fortunate.
Then we had Frank's rice and beans. Every week they get a hot meal.
After a final stir, the food is dished out, packed up and placed into insulated bags and then lugged out to a waiting car. A short drive to Brighton Beach to share their food and their faith.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
With the homeless who are waiting for them in a parking lot.
Thank you.
And when they're all fed, the volunteers go looking for others, carrying bags of food on the boardwalk to make sure no one is hungry today.
You take the whole thing.
They're taking their time out to help other people, and that's what everybody here does. We got such a great crew here. People are always willing to do something else for somebody. That's a great thing.
And now you know Pat Fleming from Our Lady of Grace and how he makes up the pulse of the parish. The Feed the Homeless ministry was started by the late Sister Jane Talbot in 1992. Now, about a dozen volunteers join Pat every week to continue the mission. And their work is desperately needed. According to the USDA, more than 34 million people in the U.S. are food insecure. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Before we let you go, we want to show you some sights of the Pope's first day in Hungary. Hope to see you again next time.